بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
The month of Muharram is a month which comes with its special blessings, and the most important one is that it comes to revive our spirits, to bring us intellectually closer to our deen and madhab. On a spiritual and emotional level, it basically increases the level of love and hub of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad in our hearts. And that should translate, hopefully, into the implementation of the teachings of Islam, for which Imam Hussain alayhi salam sacrificed everything. When we look at this process of azar, there are different ways that we discuss issues. And as I've been mentioning in the last two majalis, there are selected themes from a lecture given by a prominent Sunni scholar from the United States of America last year in November about the massacre of Karbala and the historical background of that. In the first majlis, we looked at the theme of the origin of Shiaism. And we responded to this statement that, according to this scholar, Dr. Yasir Qadhi, basically repeating the words which we have been hearing many, many times in the past, that Shiaism is an invention which started, a bid'ah which started later on in history after the events of Karbala, as a religious movement. Last night I dealt with the issue of, the so-called differences between Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. Where the attempt was by the scholar to say that Hussain was not very happy with the decision of Hassan. And we saw that's not really correct in any way or shape or form. Tonight I would like to talk about another theme which comes from the story of the Sulh Hassan as far as the situation of Kufa is concerned, because there are two places where Dr. Yasir Qadhi talks about who is to be blamed for Karbala. Yes, he talks about Yazid later on, but he assigns the blame on varying degrees. Yazid comes at the end, Umar ibn Sa'd and Shimr come at the top. But before that, he makes a comment and he says, the very first group who should be blamed for what happened in Karbala to Imam Hussain are the people of Kufa, the Shia of Ali. He says the Shia of Ali should look at themselves. And then he relates that to the story of the Tawwabin, a group later on, and we'll talk about that briefly, who went to the gravesite of Imam Hussain 3 years or 4 years after the events, did Tawbah, and therefore they are known as Tawwabin. And they also, according to the history, they basically bit themselves, in a sense, it's related this now to Matam. And according to this scholar, this was the beginning of the theological Shiaism. Before that, it was just a political movement. And so it's important to see, and I'm sure those who follow these issues and study, they know about it. But it's important because when this accusation is thrown at us, that you are responsible for what happened to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And then they tie that with the azab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And they say, you sit down and cry and you feel sorry for yourselves because you were responsible for the massacre of Karbala. This is the most ridiculous, way of thinking. Go and ask any Shia. We don't do matam, we don't cry in the majalis because we feel guilty. Actually, our azadari is a protest against those who killed Hussain ibn Ali and his family and his ashab. There is no sense of guilt here. This is the sense of defending the message and the mission of Imam Hussain alayhi salam against those who are responsible for it. And yet you say that we cry out of guilt. Come and ask us. Don't make the judgment from outside. It is very much like, the Christian right-wing groups. They say, oh, look at the Muslims, they are moon worshippers. Why? They say, oh, look at their calendar, it's based on lunar system. Is that ridiculous? When I hear this statement from a scholar saying that Shias do azadari out of guilt. You're crying because you are responsible for it. No. So let us look at the events very briefly and see, what really happened in Kufa, what happened to the Shias in Kufa in that time, and who were responsible for the massacre of Karbala. Salawat Qur'an. Last night we talked about the unity between the two brothers, Hassan and Hussain. Imam Hussain respected the peace treaty of Imam Hassan to the extent that when in the 50th year of Hijrah, when Muawiyah died, the people of Kufa sent a letter to him. They said, maybe this is the time for you to rise up. We will support you. Imam Hussain alayhi salam responded to them by saying that as long as Muawiyah is alive, you be calm. When he dies, we will see what to do. And how long did it take? 10 years. 10 long years, Hussain ibn Ali was silent. During the Khilafat of the era of Muawiyah, after the wafat of Imam Hassan. And this is where we have to realize, because this fellow says that Hussain was more emotional, looking for adventure. No. He's sitting there 10 years, he's being calm, wise, looking at the situation. Why? Because he respected the peace treaty of his brother. As long as one condition from that sulh was apparently still intact, Hussain would not violate that. And it's only when the final one was violated by appointing by Yazidi coming to power, that's where Imam Hussain alayhi salam took his first step. And that was in form of rejecting the bay'at of Yazid bin Muawiyah. And this is where he lives in Medina, goes to Mecca. This was a very major story of the time. It is spread in the Muslim world that Hussain ibn Ali has refused to do bay'at of Yazid, and he has left his home, Medina, has gone, and he has sought shelter in the city of Mecca. When this news, this is at the end of Rajab, Imam reaches Mecca early Sha'ban, 60th year of the Hijrah. The news spreads. Many people in Sha'ban come for Umrah. There was no radio those days. But these people going back from Umrah to their cities were spreading this news that Hussain bin Ali is in Mecca and he has come because he has refused to do bay'at of Yazid. And when the report reaches to Kufa, the people of Kufa started sending letters. There were individuals who will take letters signed by many people, one letter with many signatures on it. And the flow of letter increased to that extent, and I'll just summarize the theme of these letters were very similar. It would say that, addressing Imam Hussain alayhi salam, they would write to him, they say, your oppressive enemy who has assumed power deceitfully and usurped their properties and ruled over them without their consent, killed the good members of the Ummah and saved the evil ones of them, and has made Allah's wealth a monopoly of the tyrant and the rich among themselves. This was the complaint of the people of Kufa. It's important to understand what was their motive. Their motive was they were looking for justice. The people of Kufa, the people of Iraq, were tired of the tyranny and the oppressive policies of Banu Umayyah. And they saw in Imam Hussain alayhi salam a way of deliverance and success for themselves. Imam later on responded to their letters, and this is the one part of the letter that Imam Hussain alayhi salam wrote to them, where he says, the summary of your message has been. Hussain is now summarizing what you have said in different letters. What you have said is that we don't have an Imam, so come to us so that Allah may guide us to the right path. And this is where Imam Hussain then says, I swear by my life that an Imam is no one but one who rules according to the Quran, the one who establishes justice, the one who believes in the true faith and dedicates himself totally for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the role of the Imam in the Ummah, to establish justice and to rule according to Quran and the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is where we see that towards the middle of Ramadan now. So he reaches Mecca early Sha'ban, letters start coming in. It was towards latter days of Ramadan that Imam decided to investigate the situation of Kufa. And this is where Muslim bin Aqeel is now being sent by him. He goes first to Medina, and then along with his two sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim, and some guides, he crosses a very direct path, not the normal route, of the Arabian desert going towards Iraq. And the difficult challenges in the way, eventually Muslim bin Aqeel reached to Kufa. And that is where we see that, these letters which had come from Kufa, this is a very important part of the history of Karbala. Even when Imam Hussain alayhi salam was confronted first time by Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi, the cavalry force of 1,000 horsemen under Hur, when they intercepted the qafila of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, initially he didn't really confront Imam. And Imam, as you know, showed his generosity by giving them water. They had run out of water. And so when the time of namaz came, Imam asked Hur, are you going to have your separate namaz? Or are you going to join with us? And this is where Hur says, no. You do the namaz, we will join you. This is one sign of the goodness in the heart of Hur. And that was the time when Imam seized the moment. A true Imam never lets the chance go when it comes to guide the people. So for after namaz al-Zuhr, Imam stood up and gave a short khutbah, addressing the people of Hur. Then when the Zuhr namaz came, they were still there in the same area. And again Imam talked to them. And it's later on that Imam says to them after the Asr prayers, أما بعد أيها الناس إنكم إن تتقوا الله وتعرفوا الحق لأهله يكون عرضا لله عنكم. He says, O people, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have any fear and taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you know who is Ahl Haqq, then you know the reality, and that is what will be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نحن أهل بيت محمد وأولى بولاية هذا الأمر عليكم من هؤلاء المدعين ما ليس لهم والسائرين فيكم بالجور والعدوان. He says, we come from the family of Rasulullah. We have more right to rule over you than these people who are claiming to be your rulers, and they are actually behaving among you biljawri wal udwan, with oppressive method and cruelty. Wa in abaytum. Now Hussain says, you are from Kufa. إن أبيتم إلا كراهية لنا والجهل بحقنا فكان رأيكم الآن غير ما أتتني به كتبكم وقدمت من علي رسلكم. It says, now if you don't like us and you do not know our right and our haqq, or your opinion about this issue has changed based on what I saw in your letters and your messengers who came, insaraftu ankum, then I'm willing to just, go away somewhere else. Never did Imam Hussain alayhi salam initiate hostilities. Now if you don't like me, your letters are saying that, you wanted me to come, I'm coming. If you don't like me, then I'll go. فقال الحر. This is where Hur says, أنا والله ما أدري ما هذه الكتب والرسل التي تذكر. Hur says to the Imam that I actually have absolutely no clue of the letters you are talking about and the messengers you are talking about, because he was not part of this process. And this is where Imam says to one of his slaves, يا عقبة بن سمعان أخرج الخرجين اللذين فيهما كتبهم إلي. His slave, Uqba bin Sam'an, who was actually the slave of Janab Rabab, when she married Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he was given part of the jahez, if we may call it. And Janab Rabab dedicated him to the service of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And he was with Imam Hussain alayhi salam all the time. In modern terms, I can say that if Imam had a secretary, it was Uqba bin Sam'an. He would never leave Imam, wherever Imam was. And this is a very important point. We'll talk about it in some other nights, about the negotiations between Amr ibn Sa'd and Imam Hussain alayhi salam, because nobody was there except Uqba, who was there with the Imam. And so he's a very important figure in the history and the reporting of Karbala. And so Imam says to Uqba bin Sam'an, bring the two sacks, Guni, which has their letters, bring them to me, and take out the letters. And this is where Imam says, these are the letters that I'm talking about. So Imam actually carried those letters, and there were so many that they had to be put in two containers. And this is where Hur says, إِنَّ لَسْنَ مِنَ هَؤُلَاءِ الَّذِينَ كَتَبُوا إِلَيْكَ. We are not from the group who had written to you. Rather, we have been told to intercept you wherever we find you, and not to leave you until we bring you to Kufa, to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. And this is where Imam says to him, Al-Maut adna ilayka min dhalik. Hur, before you attain your objective, you will die. You cannot force me to go with you to Kufa, to Ibn Ziyad. Salawat kun ek bar. And so it's on the basis of these letters which came from Kufa that Imam sent Muslim bin Aqeel. And when Muslim bin Aqeel comes into Kufa, between 12 to 18,000 people did bay'at on his hand in the name of Hussain bin Ali. 12 to 18,000 people. Yet the question comes up that at the end he was abandoned. The people who hosted him were put in prison or killed. Hani bin Urwa. And even when on just the day before Shahadat, he tried to rescue Hani bin Urwa from Ibn Ziyad's darbar, there were 300 people with him. But when he goes to the masjid, those 300 became 30. He led the namaz. When he finished the namaz, even 30 were not there, to zero. And so this is where the question comes up. Who were these people of Kufa who abandoned Muslim bin Aqeel? Were they Shias? This is where these people get this excuse to say that it was the Shias who invited Hussain, and then they either killed him or abandoned him. And this is where we have to look at it, because Wahhabis very frequently, and this is not only the issue of Dr. Yasir Qadhi, this is a very common theme in the anti-Shia propaganda used by the Wahhabis, that the Shias are the one who are qatileen and the murderers of Hussain. And so let us look at this issue very briefly. Salawat pradhe ek baar. last night when we were talking about the situation of Iraq during the days of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, after the Shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I mentioned this point, and I hope I was successful in conveying that message that the people of Iraq were not all theological Shia. Majority of them were opportunists. Even if they were with Ali or Imam Hassan, it was not because of Hubb Ali, it was more because of Bughz Muawiyah. And this is a very common thing that we see. And so we have to understand the society of Kufa. We can actually divide them into three groups. Some of those people who wrote the letters and signed on it, some of them, and rather I would say a minority of them, were true and devoted Shias of Ali. They were, their Aqidah was the Shi'i Aqidah. People like Habib ibn Madahir, people like Muslim bin Awsaja, people like Hani bin Hani, people like Sa'ad bin Abdullah. These are prominent figures of Kufa who were known to be Shia of Ali, and they actually signed the letters, and some of them even went to Mecca with those letters. And these individuals, all of them, one way or another, they were able to reach to Imam Hussain, either in Kufa or in Mecca, or on the way, or in Karbala. And they became among the Shuhada of Karbala. Then there were some other Shias who had done bay'at. They were Shias. They had done bay'at in the hand of Muslim bin Aqeel, but they were prevented by Ibn Ziyad from joining Hussain bin Ali. Just few days before Ashura, Ibn Ziyad assigned Zabr bin Qais al-Ju'fi with 500 soldiers, and his mission was to keep a watch on all the roads leading to Karbala and to prevent any Shia of Kufa or a supporter of Hussain from reaching Karbala. For example, we have one example of Amir bin Abi Salma, who actually was able to somehow fight with them, and then very speedily, ran in a direction where he was able to finally reach to Karbala. And he became among the Shuhada. So we see that, Ibn Ziyad actively, in a way, cordoned Kufa. All the ways leading towards Karbala, where there were checkpoints that people could not reach there, even those who wanted. So there were Shias who had signed and who wanted to go and support Imam Hussain alayhi salam, but they were prevented by Ibn Ziyad. There were some, because they were prevented and couldn't go. Now Ibn Ziyad announced that any able-bodied person in Kufa who can pick up arms must join this army against Hussain. And if they don't do that, they will be killed. As an example, there was one traveler from Sham. He was not even a Kufi. From Sham came because he was related to some family or Qabila in Kufa, and he had come to finalize his inheritance issue with his family there. They caught him, and he refused. He says, I have come for my personal business, nothing to do with this. He was a Shami, yet Ibn Ziyad ordered him to be killed as an example for the people of Kufa, that if I don't leave him, I don't really care about your lives. And because of that, many Shias, true Shias, who could not join Hussain were forced to go into hiding. Then there was a group of prominent people like Mukhtar bin Ubaidullah al-Saqafi and Sulaiman bin Surad al-Khudai. They were there supporting Muslim bin Aqeel, but later on they were arrested and they were in prison. So this is as far as the Shia community is concerned, that they were the people, Some of them reached, some of them were prevented, some of them had to hide so that they will not be forced to join the Yazidi army going to Karbala. And one of them, Sulaiman bin Surad al-Khudai, who was in prison, he was freed later on. And he is the one who gathered the group of people. And there was a dispute between Mukhtar and him on this issue. Mukhtar was saying it's still not the right time to take revenge against Banu Umayyah. He was more a military strategist, and he saw that was not the right time. Whereas this is just 2 or 3 years after Karbala, but Sulaiman bin Surad al-Khudai gathered a large number of people that no, we will go and seek revenge from Banu Umayyah for what happened in Karbala. And the first thing they did was they went to Karbala, did Noha and Buka, and they did Tawbah there. And therefore that group came to be known as Tawwabin. But what was the Tawbah for? Was it Tawbah for killing Imam Hussain? Was it the Tawbah for supporting those who killed Imam Hussain? No. They were feeling bad that we were alive, but we were not able to go and support Imam Hussain. So it's not an issue of feeling guilty for what happened in that way. Rather the sense that, we were not able to support Imam Hussain because of the circumstances. And so you cannot say these are the people who are to be blamed. They are the one who killed Hussain, and now they are crying on themselves. And then link that to the azah of the millions and millions of Shia across the century, and say the Shias even now sit down and cry and do matam and beat themselves out of guilt of the responsibility for killing Imam Hussain. This is a very ridiculous way of looking at things. However, so this is as far as Shias of Kufa are concerned. Majority of those who signed the letters and who did bay'at at the hand of Muslim bin Aqeel, these were the people who are known as opportunists. The people whose iman was weak. They can very easily be swayed by the peer pressure. And this is where, when they realize Hussain ibn Ali is coming, he is the grandson of the Prophet, a prominent member of Quraysh, he is willing to lead us, rescue us from the zulm of Banu Umayyah. They said, well, why not? We'll join. Because they consider Hussain at that moment to be the winning party. But then things change. When Ibn Ziyad came in, when he put pressure on the people of Kufa in different ways, this is where you see that these people with the weak iman gave in to Banu Umayyah. But they were not Shias. They sided initially with Muslim bin Aqeel and Imam Hussain not because they believed in them, but because of the common enemy. Those of you who come from Pakistan, we just look at things from far away. Imran Khan and Tahir al-Qadiri are two different parties, isn't it? Is it one party or two different parties? Two different parties, two different ideologies. But they are together because they have a common enemy. Nawaz Sharif has become a common enemy. So they are there together, not because they are one. To some extent, on an international level, look at the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are together against ISIS. So would you say that Iran and America are now one and the same? No. But sometimes, when you have a common objective and a common enemy, you get together. And this is where we see that the majority of the people of Kufa were not Shia of Ali. They were opportunists. For them, Banu Umayyah, the zulm of Banu Umayyah was the main thing. They didn't have a leader within themselves. The grandson of Rasulullah is willing to lead them. He has the credentials, he has the background, and he has the charisma. They said, okay, we'll go with him. Not that they really believed in him as the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth at that time. Salawat. And some among this third group were prominent tribal leaders of Kufa. People like Shabs bin Rabi', Hajar bin Abjar, Qais bin Ash'as, and Yazid bin al-Harith. Not only that, they signed these letters which were sent to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They were signatories to that. They changed sides when Ibn Ziyad put the pressure, to the extent that they became commanders and senior officers of the army of Yazid. Umar ibn Sa'd with 4,000 men under him, this was a proper army of Banu Umayyah. Hur and his cavalry force were proper army. All others who came were because of their own tribal influence, they would gather their own people, and because of the tribal and peer pressure, they would go with the leader of the tribe. This is where you see one would come with 1,000 soldiers, one will come with 2,000, another will come with 4,000. And this is how we get the numbers, about 25 to 30,000 people gathering in Karbala to kill one person. And this is the reality. On the day of Ashura, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, in the khutbah that he gave, he actually gave 2 or 3 khutbahs on that day, just to make sure that the people there will not have an excuse on the day of Qiyamah to say, we didn't know. There is a statement, if somebody had come to him, it's a long story, but Imam says, if you are going to abandon me and this army, he said, I don't want to be here. And he was from the army of Yazid. He remembered something, and then he came to Imam, I don't want to fight you. And Imam says, if you're going to leave, then you better leave now before you hear my plea for nusrat and help. Because wherever my voice reaches, all those who do not respond to me, they are doomed in Akhirat. And so Imam wanted to make the hujjat, complete. In one of the khutbahs he says, referring these to the commanders there, فَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي شَكٍّ مِنْ هَذَا أَفَتَشَكُّونَ أَنِّي ابْنَ بِنْتِ نَبِيِّكُمْ. If you don't believe in other things, then at least do you doubt that I am the grandson of Rasulullah? فَوَاللَّهِ مَا بَيْنَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ ابْنَ بِنْتِ نَبِيٍّ غَيْرِ فِيكُمْ وَلَا فِي غَيْرِكُمْ. On this face of earth, there is no one who is the grandson of the Prophet other than me. وَيْحَكُمْ أَتُطَّطْلِبُونِي بِقَتِيلٍ مِّنْكُمْ قَتَلْتُهُ. What do you want from me? Are you seeking revenge for somebody that I killed from you? أَوْ مَالٍ لَكُمْ إِسْتَحْلَكْتُهُ. Or have I taken your property? أَوْ بِقِصَاصٍ جَرَاحَةٍ. Or have I injured somebody and you are seeking revenge from me? And then he says, فَعَقَضُوا لَا يُكَلِّمُونَهُ. Historians say that Yazidi army didn't have any response. And that's where Imam Hussain started calling the names of the officers. Ya Shams bin Rabi'i, Ya Hajjar bin Abjar, Ya Qais bin al-Ash'as, Ya Yazid bin al-Harith. أَلَمْ تَكْتُبُوا إِلَيَّ أَنْ قَدْ أَيْنَعْتِ الثِّمَارِ وَخْضَرَّ الْجِنَابِ. Were you not the people who wrote to me that the farm is green, the fruits are ripe now, means the time is right for you to come, so that you can lead an army which is prepared and ready for you to serve you. And this is where Qais bin Ash'as says, oh, we don't know what you are saying. And this is Imam at that time says that you are the ones who wrote, signed on those letters. And then they said, no. You have only one choice, and that is to surrender to Yazid and come and do bay'at to Ibn Ziyad for Yazid. And that is where Imam Hussain utters his famous words, La wallahi, la utikum biyadi i'ta' al-dhalil, wa la ufirru farar al-abid. No, by Allah, I am not going to give my hand to you in humiliation like a slave, nor I am going to run away like those who are, low-class people. I will stand here and I will fight for myself. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. And so when we talk about Kufa, Kufa was not necessarily a city of the Shias of Ali. They were all different kinds of people. And many of them were opportunists who actually abducted him, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And so to say that the Shias killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam or supported in killing him, this can be the most ridiculous statement, as far as history is concerned. This issue is not a new issue when they try to put the blame on the Shias. Many ulama in the past have written about it. Even my late father had written an article in Urdu in 1950. This is long even before I was born, where he had a different perspective of looking at it, and he had three different ways of countering this argument, and one was from the perspective of ilm hadith. He said, why don't we look at the Shia and the Sunni point of view about the leaders of the Yazidi army? He says, if you look at the Sunni books, for example, Umar ibn Sa'd, commander-in-chief of the Yazidi forces in Karbala, the way they write about him, because he is known to be one of the Rawi of Hadith of Rasulullah. And they describe him and they say, وَهُوَ تَابِعِيٌّ ثِقَةٌ. He is a tabi'i, he is not from the Sahaba, he is from the second generation. هُوَ تَابِعِيٌّ ثِقَةٌ. Thiqa means trustworthy in his words and his narration. وَهُوَ الَّذِي قَتَلَ الْحُسَيْنِ. Ajib, in one sentence. You are saying he is trustworthy and he is the one who killed Hussain. How can you trust somebody who is, guilty for killing Imam Hussain alayhi salam? And these are the people who talk about, ilm hadith, about who are the important. Another one, in Taqrib al-Tahzib, he says, he lived in Kufa, saduqun. Not only sadiq, saduq. He was most truthful. ولكن مقته الناس لكونه أميرا على الجيش الذي قتل الحسين بن علي. But he is blamed by the people because he was the commander of the army which killed Hussain bin Ali. So on one hand they would take somebody who is the qatil of Hussain and still consider him to be thiqa. And yet you say that the Shias killed Hussain ibn Ali? For us, even if there were 10,000 hadiths narrated by such people, we would throw them out. They are, totally da'if from our perspective because we do not believe in authenticity or thiqa of such people. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. बस आखिर में एक और पॉइंट आपके सामने हम पेश करना चाहेंगे कि खुद फरीक़ैन की ज़बान से आप सुन लें कातिलीन क्या थे और मक़तूल क्या थे, उनका मज़हब क्या था। ये एक मज़मून है जो हमने ग़ालिबन कई साल पहले यहाँ एक अशरे में पेश किया था, लेकिन बहरहाल मुझे यकीन है कि आपको याद नहीं होगा। सलावत पढ़ने के बाद तारीख़ में अरब मुआशरे में एक अजीब टैलेंट है अरबों में उस ज़माने में कि जब ये प्रेशर में होते हैं तो इनके शेर और शायरी के जो फ़न है ना, وہ سامنے آ جاتا ہے. اور شعر و شاعری کے ایک قسم ہے جسے کہتے ہیں رجز، یعنی وہ اشعار جو انسان میدان جنگ میں پڑھتا ہے اپنے کو ذرا جوش دلانے کے لیے بھی اور اپنے کو انٹروڈیوس کرنے کے لیے دشمن کے سامنے کہ ہم کیا ہیں. تو شروع میں یہی ہوتا تھا کہ ایک آدمی آئے گا، اپنے کو انٹروڈیوس کرے گا، پھر سامنے والا جواب دے گا. تو ہمارے یہاں تاریخ طبری میں بھی ہے، سنیوں کی جو مشہور تاریخ ہے، اور دوسری تواریخ میں بھی ہے، اور ہمارے کتابوں میں زیادہ ہیں کہ یہ جو رجز کے اشعار پڑھے گئے تھے فریقین سے عاشور کے دن، اس پرسپیکٹو سے بھی دیکھا جائے کہ ان کا مذہب کیا تھا اور ان کا مذہب کیا تھا، تب معلوم ہو جائے گا کہ اگر کسی مذہب کو ذمہ دار ٹھہرانا ہے تو خود فریقین کے کلمات کو دیکھ لیں. 2-3 مثال صرف. نافع بن ہلال الجملی، یہ امام حسین علیہ السلام کے ایک صحابی تھے، شہید ہوئے ہیں اور بہت وفادار تھے. عاشور سے پہلے غالباً 8 یا 9 محرم کو یہ اپنے قبیلے والوں کے ساتھ نہر القمہ تک پہنچے اور یزیدی لشکر نے ان کو چھوڑ دیا، چونکہ یہ وہیں کے قبیلے والے تھے یہ لوگ. لیکن انہوں نے کہا کہ یہ پانی صرف تمہارے لیے ہے، تم وہاں نہیں لے جا سکتے. تو نافع بن ہلال ان لوگوں میں سے تھے کہ جنہوں نے کہا کہ نہیں، اگر یہ پانی حسین کو نہیں ملے گا تو ہم نہیں پیئیں گے. یعنی وفاداری اور جسے تشیع کہتے ہیں اس کی مثال ان کی ہے، نافع بن ہلال الجملی کی. واپس آ جاتے ہیں. عاشور کے دن جب یہ لڑے ہیں تو انہوں نے اپنا تعارف جو کیا ہے رجز کے اشعار میں، ان تنکرونی فانا ابن الجملی، اگر تم مجھے نہیں جانتے ہو تو پہچان لو ہم ابن الجملی ہیں. دینی علی دین حسین بن علی، میرا دین و مذہب وہ دین و مذہب ہے جو حسین بن علی کا ہے. یزیدی لشکر میں سے ایک آیا مقابلے کے لیے، اس کا نام تھا مزاحد بن حریث، یہ طبری میں بھی ہے. اس نے اس کا جواب دیا، چونکہ انہوں نے نافع نے کہا تھا دینی علی دین حسین بن علی، تو وہ سامنے سے آ کے کہتا ہے انا علی دین عثمان. ہمیں کوئی کامنٹ نہیں کرنا ہے. آئیڈینٹی جو ہے دونوں گروپ کی کلیئر ہے. قاتل کا مذہب کیا ہے، مقتول کا مذہب کیا ہے. جس پر نافع بن ہلال نے تنقید کی کہ بھائی تم نے یہ غلط کہا ہے کہ انا علی دین عثمان، تمہیں کہنا چاہیے انت علی دین شیطان. وہ شعر کا وہ جو رزم ہے اس کو برقرار رکھا ہے کہ تمہارا کوئی دین و مذہب نہیں ہے، تم سب شیطان کے فالوور ہو. اور انہوں نے اس پہ حملہ کیا، نافع نے اس کو قتل کر دیا اور اپنی جہاد جاری رکھی. اور رجز کنٹینیو رکھتے ہیں، انا ابن الحلال الجملی انا علی دین علی. صلوات پڑھنا ایک بار. ایک اور شہید عبد الرحمن بن عبداللہ الیزنی جب جاتے ہیں جہاد کے لیے اپنا تعارف کرتے ہیں، انا ابن عبداللہ بن آل یزن، کہ میں عبد الرحمن بن عبداللہ آل یزن قبیلہ ہے ان سے ہیں. دینی علی دین حسین و حسن، میرا دین وہ ہے جو حسین اور حسن. ان شیعوں کے نظر میں حسن اور حسین میں کوئی فرق نہیں تھا. اضربکم ضرب فتن من الیمن، یہ یمن کا قبیلہ تھا جہاں سے آئے تھے، کہ ہم وہ ضرب لگائیں گے تمہیں جو یمن کے جوانوں کے ضرب ہوتی ہے. ارجو بذالک الفوز عند المؤتمن، اور یہ ضرب جب ہم لگاتے ہیں تو صرف اس سے ہم اجر و ثواب چاہتے ہیں. اس کے بعد مالک بن انس الکاہلی، یا روایات میں تھوڑا نام میں اختلاف ہے، یہ بھی صحابی تھے اور بہت ہی ضعیف تھے جناب حبیب کی طرح. یہ اپنا جب تعارف کرتے ہیں تو اپنے عقیدے کو بیان کرتے ہیں کہ ہم جن کی پیروی یہاں کرتے ہیں وہ کون ہیں اور جن کی پیروی تم کرتے ہو وہ کون ہیں. فرماتے ہیں آل علی شیعۃ الرحمن. یہ آل علی جو ہمارے لیڈر ہیں یہ شیعۃ الرحمن ہیں, یہ خدا رحمان کے پیرو ہیں. شیعہ کہتے ہیں پیروی کرنے والے. وآل حرب یعنی آل ابو سفیان شیعۃ الشیطان, تو ہم ان کی پیروی کرتے ہیں جو شیعۃ الرحمن ہیں اور تم ان کی پیروی کرتے ہو جو شیعۃ الشیطان ہیں. یہاں لفظ شیعہ کا استعمال بہت اہم ہے, بعد میں ہمیں اس پہ آنا ہے. خود امام حسین علیہ السلام نے عنوان شیعہ کو کوالیفائی کیا ہے. ایک مرحلہ تھا جب امام حسین علیہ السلام اپنے جنگ کے آخری مرحلے میں, یعنی جنگ بہت ہی شجاعانہ طریقے سے لڑے ہیں, جب بھی حملہ کرتے تھے لشکر جو ہے وہ پیچھے ہٹا چلا جاتا تھا. آخر میں عمر بن سعد نے اپنے 4000 تیر انداز دستے کو حکم دیا کہ حسین کو گھیر لو. اب سوچ لیں 4000 افراد اپنے کمان میں تیر لگائے ہوئے ہیں, نشان صرف ایک حسین ابن علی ہے. اور جب تیروں کی بارش ہوئی ہے اس وقت امام حسین علیہ السلام نے اپنی تکلیف کا خیال نہیں کیا. گھوڑے پہ بیٹھے تھے, نظر جاتی ہے اس دائرے سے باہر کہ یزیدی لشکر کے کچھ ملاعین خیموں کی طرف بڑھ رہے تھے. اس وقت امام نے ایک جملہ کہا ہے عمر بن سعد اور شمر سے کہ یا شیعۃ آل ابی سفیان ان لم یکن لکم دین ولا تخافون المعاد فکونوا احرارا لدنیاکم, کہ اے آل ابی سفیان کے پیرو اور شیعہ, اگر تمہارا کوئی دین نہیں ہے, قیامت کا خوف نہیں ہے, تو کم سے کم دنیا کی انسانیت کا ثبوت دو. جب تک حسین زندہ ہے میرے اہل حرم پر حملہ مت کرو. تمہاری عرب غیرت کہاں گئی, تمہاری مردانگی کہاں گئی؟ ہم زندہ ہیں, آ کے مجھ سے لڑو. لیکن حسین نے یہ تعبیر استعمال کی ہے یا شیعۃ آل ابی سفیان, اے آل ابی سفیان کے شیعہ اور پیرو. خود ابن زیاد ملعون نے جب یہ قافلہ آیا ہے سروں کو لے کے یہ لوگ پہنچے ہیں کوفہ, جو تقریر اس نے کی ہے اس میں ایک جملہ ہے کہ خداوند عالم کا شکر ہے کہ اس نے حق ظاہر کیا اور یزید کی نصرت کی. اور پھر الفاظ دیکھیے, کچھ تو توہین آمیز جملے ہیں اس کو ہم چھوڑ رہے ہیں. وَقَتَلَ الْحُسَيْن بن علی وَشِيعَتِهِ, وہ اللہ کا شکر ادا کر رہا ہے کہ اللہ نے یزید کی نصرت کی اور حسین اور حسین کے شیعوں کو قتل کیا. ان الفاظ کو اگر آپ دیکھیں تو بات کلیئر ہو جاتی ہے کہ حسین کے شیعہ مقتول ہیں. اگر آپ الفاظ میں کنفیوز ہو جا رہے ہیں کہ شیعوں نے حسین کو قتل کیا ہے تو آپ تاریخ کو دیکھیں, یا تو وہ شیعہ شیطان ہیں یا شیعہ آل ابی سفیان ہیں. شیعہ علی قطعاً نہیں تھے, اس لیے کہ جن میں یہ صلاحیت تھی کہ وہ پہنچ سکے یقیناً وہ پہنچے تھے. اور جن میں سب سے اہم شخصیت کوفے کی جناب حبیب بن مظاہر ہیں. آپ واقعات کو جانتے ہیں. حسین نے جب اپنے لشکر کی تشکیل کی ہے عاشور کے دن, میمنہ کی سرداری زہیر کو دی ہے, میسرہ کی سرداری حبیب کو دی ہے, اور قلب لشکر کی سرداری عباس کو دی ہے. حبیب سب سے ضعیف العمر صحابی تھے وہاں, لیکن حسین سے بہت قریب تھے. دوست بھی تھے بچپنے کے. جب دوست ہوتا ہے تو دوست کی توہین برداشت نہیں کر سکتا ہے. جب نماز کا وقت ہوا ہے اور ابو ثمامہ نے نماز کو یاد کیا ہے اور امام سے التجا کی ہے. ان شہداء کربلا کے التجا کو بھی آپ دیکھیں, ان کی خواہشات کو بھی دیکھیں. حالات جنگ کے ہیں, ماحول جنگ کا ہے, لیکن ان کی تمنا کیا ہے کہ مولا ایک بار اور آپ کے اقتداء میں نماز پڑھنی. نماز تو پڑھ سکتے تھے تنہا بھی, لیکن تمنا یہ تھی کہ حسین کے اقتداء میں نماز پڑھیں. امام نے دعائے خیر کی اور اپنے اصحاب سے کہا کہ ان یزیدیوں سے کہو کہ نماز کا وقت ہو چکا ہے, جنگ روک دی جائے. تو انہی میں سے ایک افسر تھا حسین بن نمیر ملعون, جو جواباً یہ کہتا ہے کہ اے حسین آپ نماز پڑھ کے کیا کریں گے؟ صلاتک لا تقبل نعوذ باللہ. حسین آپ نماز پڑھ کے کیا کریں گے؟ آپ کی نماز قبول نہیں ہوگی. یہ وہ حسین ہے کہ جس کے بچپنے کے عمل سے تکبیر 7 بار مستحب ہے. یہ وہ حسین ہے کہ تشہد میں جب آپ تمام مسلمان شیعہ سے لے کے وہابی تشہد میں جب صلوات پڑھتے ہیں تو حسین یقیناً بالاتفاق اس میں وہاں مراد ہیں آل محمد. ان کے لیے یہ ملعون کہتا ہے کہ آپ کی نماز قبول نہیں ہوگی. یہ وہ توہین تھی جو حبیب ابن مظاہر برداشت نہ کر سکے. تلوار نکالتے ہیں, حسین بن نمیر پر حملہ کرتے ہیں, وہ گھوڑے سے زمین پہ گرتا ہے, اس کے سپاہ آ کے اس کو بچا کے لے جاتے ہیں. لیکن اب حبیب کا جو یہ غضب تھا, جو غصہ تھا توہین حسین پر, یہ قابو نہیں کر سکے. حملے کو جاری رکھتے ہیں, لیکن یہ ایک ضعیف العمر سپاہی کب تک لڑتا. آخر میں جب چاروں طرف سے حملہ ہوتا ہے, حبیب بن مظاہر زخمی ہو کے زمین کربلا پر بیٹھ جاتے ہیں. ایک ملعون آتا ہے اور پشت سے ایک نیزہ مارتا ہے, اس طرح سے کہ اس کی انی جو ہے سامنے نظر آنے لگی اور جناب حبیب زمین پہ گر جاتے ہیں. حسین نے جب اس منظر کو دیکھا ہے, اصحاب کہتے ہیں کہ حسین کے چہرے پر تکلیف کے آثار اس سے پہلے اس طرح سے نہیں دیکھے گئے تھے جو حسین نے حبیب کی شہادت کے منظر کو دیکھا ہے. یزیدی لشکر کے یہ ملعون آگے بڑھتے ہیں اور جناب حبیب ابن مظاہر کے سر کو تن سے جدا کرتے ہیں, اور قاتل نے اس کو آپس میں اختلاف بھی ہونے لگا, اس لیے کہ یہ بہت بڑی شخصیت تھی. آخر میں جس ملعون کو یہ سر ملا ہے, اس نے اپنے گھوڑے کی گردن میں اس سر کو باندھ دیا, اور اسی طرح سے یہ سر چلا ہے کربلا سے کوفہ تک. عزاداران حسین جب کوفہ میں وارد ہوئے ہیں یہ قافلہ, جناب حبیب کا ایک جوان العمر بیٹا تھا جس کا نام قاسم بن حبیب تھا. اس کی روایت ہے کہ ہم نے جب بابا کے سر کو دیکھا تو ہم اس سپاہی کے ساتھ ساتھ چلنے لگے, راستے میں ساتھ رہے, ابن زیاد کے دربار میں بھی ساتھ رہے, اور جب وہاں سے وہ نکلا ہے تو ہم نے ہاتھ جوڑ کے کہا ہے کہ اس سر کو مجھے دے دو, مجھ سے یہ برداشت نہیں ہوتا ہے کہ میرے بابا کے سر تیرے گھوڑے کے گردن میں اس طرح سے لٹک رہا ہے. قاسم بن حبیب سے کہیں گے, اے قاسم بن حبیب, یہ صرف ایک سر کا معاملہ تھا, عابد بیمار کے چہرے کو دیکھو, بنو ہاشم کے 18 افراد ہیں, بابا کا نیزہ کے بلند سر, بھائیوں کا سر ہے, چچاؤں کا سر. لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین, سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. خداوند اس طلبہ قبول فرما, ہمارے گناہ کو بخش دے, ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما. خداوند شیعان علی جہاں جہاں ہیں ان کو اپنے حفظ و امان میں رکھ. تکفیری مفسد عناصر جہاں جہاں ہیں خداوندہ ان کی طاقت کو نیست و نابود فرما. اگر وہ قابل ہدایت ہیں تو ان کی ہدایت فرما، ورنہ انہیں بھی نیست و نابود فرما۔ ایمان کے ظہور میں تعجل فرما۔ ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم۔